In February 2011, terror struck the city of Miami Beach. A city typically known for its party scene was up in flames. A wave of fires was going across the city, and it was not accidental. It was intentional. This meant one thing: a serial arsonist was out on the loose. Joining me today is former City of Miami Beach police detective Howard Bennett. In this episode, he'll walk us through everything, from the fire scenes to the investigation to the breakthrough that led to the arrest of the perpetrator and the background of the suspect. Welcome to Investigate, where we break down true cases from the perspective of the investigators who work them. Howard, tell me this: what got you interested in law enforcement?
Actually, it came out by accident. My father was a police officer, as was my godfather in New York. I was the guy who never wanted to be a cop. My brother always did. My brother, shortly after the Mariel boat lift, they had a huge need for police officers down here. He joined the Miami-Dade Police Department. They hired him out of John Jay College. I was running a limousine company in New York. I came down here to visit him, and he asked me if I wanted to do a ride-along. And I did a ride-along. He was a midnight officer in Liberty City, which was a fairly economically depressed area. I rode with him one night, and at the end of it, I found myself bothered by the fact that he did more good in a single evening than most people do in a year. I was brought up in a household where honor and duty were what we talked about. When we got together, these were things we talked about. These were never negotiable aspects. My father's generation fought in World War II. He was in 82nd Airborne. And when he got done with that, he continued his public service. My brother always wanted to be that. He always talked about that. But even though I wasn't heading in that direction, that was still what we talked about. That was still the standard. And so I walked away from that ride along, and I was bothered by that hole in my own life. Mm-hmm. So within about a year, I got with my partner, and he took over the business, and I came to South Florida. I had looked into New York, and they don't really do the job like we do down here. So I came down here. I applied for a lot of different places.
Okay. So why'd you decide to go with Miami Beach?
They hired me fastest.
All right. Okay. So it was the first one to offer you the position.
I put in 27, I think, applications when I got down here. Okay. I wanted to go to a county. I wanted Hillsborough County first, then Miami-Dade County, then Broward County. My brother wanted me to go to Miami Beach. And from the time I put in the application to the time I walked into the academy, 5 months.
5 months. Okay.
Yeah.
What was a typical time frame back then?
Miami-Dade, the hiring process took about 18 months. 18
months. Okay.
Yeah.
5 months versus 18 months doesn't take a genius.
Correct. Get in the academy, and again, once you have a year or two's experience, so long as you don't jack yourself up and get in trouble, you can then look outside. And in fact, that's what I did. In my second year, just about my second or third year, I went up and applied again to Hillsborough County, and I was on the list there. Mm-hmm. When I came back, there was an opening for a detective, and it gave me an opportunity to look at other things. And so I stayed in Miami Beach, which is where I spent 27 years.
Okay. Actually, so walk me through this. So you go through the academy, you get out on patrol, and after how many years did you become a detective?
It happened fairly rapidly for me. I was a detective by the end of 1991.
Okay, so you started in 1988.
I was out of the academy in 1989, okay, on the road. And by late 1991, early 1992, we were asked to attack a problem on South Beach. And at the time, dope was running rampant. You could literally bump into a guy on the street and have crack rock fall out of his pocket onto the sidewalk. It was everywhere. I really wasn't that interested in that. I was a much older cop than most rookies are. I was 27 years old when I started it. I'd already been in business. I'd already worked for many years. It was about service to the victims and going after people that victimize other people. So I wasn't really into that. The upside of that was when an opportunity came up, they asked me to put together a small group of guys to go out and attack some other problems in South Beach. So I got a bunch of my buddies, actually my poker playing club, and we went out. I set it up. I did all the paperwork, action plans, and all that. And I put all that together, and I saved it all in a book. And so we did that for about a year. And we originally went out there to conquer auto burglaries and auto theft. And we did it on I had a very complicated setup. I had ground surveillance, rooftop surveillance, and then a takedown team.
This is all on patrol.
On a patrol. We would literally do this for the first 4 hours of our night. We worked a 10-hour day. So we'd come in an hour early, we'd work 4 hours, and then we'd all jump back we'd keep 2 guys in plain clothes to do plain clothes work. And the rest of us would either be writing up our arrests or putting our uniforms on and going out in mark cars and doing the rest of the night. Later on, that evolved into, again, an area of law enforcement I really didn't have a great interest in, but I also ran a prostitution detail for about 6 months because I was now experienced in that form of surveillance type law enforcement.
Okay.
Well, again, I went up to Hillsborough to check that out. I came back, and they were forming a unit called the Auto Tactical Unit. Miami Beach at the time was having, I think the numbers that I pulled were 385 burglaries to auto every month. Yes, they're just smashing a window, going in, taking chump change or whatever else they can get out of it, but it's a Part 1 felony. It's a burglary by Florida law, and we really looked bad at the end of the year when you did these UCR stats. So they put a 3-man team together, what they called the Auto Tactical Unit. And then I went up and I was expected to do the same things I did. Problem is, they wanted me working day shift. And I was like, look, I'm very sorry, but the guys I know just aren't here. I'd been now on midnights in South End for a couple of years. I knew what the city was at night. And then in the daytime, it was a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wound up going up there in auto tactical, and then working there, I got recruited into the property crimes unit.
So this is your first detective,
Yep.
officially detective role, property crimes.
Correct. So, well, yes. When I first went into auto tactical, I went in there to do that, and then I got moved into the auto theft unit, and then from there I got recruited into property crimes, where I was a burglary and theft detective.
Okay.
In those days, technology being what it was, that also encompassed economic crimes, fraud and things like that. So I did a well-rounded sort of anything that wasn't really violent crimes, fraud, and that. And then when anything big happened, they would pull you in and you'd get to work. I did 2 officer-involved shootings. I worked in those cases, and I would get pulled in because, again, when those opportunities came up, I was always, yeah, I'm available. Let's go do it.
Gotcha. Now let's take a back step real quick. Tell me about Miami Beach. What is Miami Beach like? I mean, people hear about Miami Beach, they see it on the TVs, spring break, party scene. What's it like in Miami Beach?
This is kind of one of the things I wanted to bring up because it impacts this case also. Miami Beach has been evolving greatly since the time I got there. When I first got there, it was the old MacArthur Causeway, 2 lanes east, 2 lanes west, with mangroves in the middle. No seawall. I mean, you had drunks driving off the causeway into the water once a month. So South Beach, my brother had gone there in 1982 when he was in the academy, and he referred to it as the armpit of South Florida. South of 5th Street was no man's land. Every time we fixed a street light, they would shoot it out again. You didn't go south of 5th without a backup. The clubs were just starting, but when I got there, there was Penrod's, which was later Nikki Beach, at the end of the beach. There was the Clevelander, a much smaller venue than it is now, and just north of that was the Adrian. And that's it. That's the only bars that upscale people would go to. Everything else was just recovering from basically a blight. Many of the buildings were Section 8 housing. Ocean Drive was just a long string of porches and aluminum chairs that had to be chained together to keep them from being stolen. And old people, we called it God's waiting room. They would sit out there and watch the sun come up and watch the sun go down, and all the buildings were rent controlled. And then one of them would pass away, and the other people at that time that were on rent control were our new residents, the folks from Cuba that got pushed out during Mariel's. They were all also on Section 8, and they would take over those apartments. At that point in time, Miami Beach was a point of interest for several different groups, but one of the biggest ones was gays and lesbians. There was a big push on to make the Seagull Hotel the largest gay resort in the country. And so people would come visit us, gay men would come visit us, lesbians come, and they would invest in Miami Beach. Most of the people at the time were trying to hold on to their investment, but they just weren't reinvesting in the buildings and stuff like that. And then as these areas started to build, I mean, I think that Miami Beach really wouldn't have become what it was if not for the investment by the gay community. They came in, they saw something there, they wanted to live they wanted to build a community that was more accepting for everybody, and they did, to a certain extent, accomplish that. But they had started investing, and they started building up pockets and meet groups, and they had a lot of things that specifically focused on that. And again, they were a different element in how Miami Beach went. But shortly after that, they put in the new MacArthur Causeway, took out the drawbridge at the other end, which was quite a boon to law enforcement, I must say, but they got rid of that, put in the new MacArthur Causeway, walls and stuff, made traffic a lot safer, and then the new Ocean Drive. All those porches, they expanded the roadway, cut out all the porches, and then started reinvesting in the buildings and building in the buildings. And suddenly, the tone of Miami Beach, at least South Beach, changed a lot, but only really from Washington Avenue east. There's 13 blocks east to west in South Beach. So Washington, Collins, Ocean, and their alleys, you had the bars, the really nice, the better hotels, you had a lot of the clubs, all in this area that ran from 5th Street to 15th Street. Please remember what I said about 5th Street. 5th Street took a long time to change. That was no man's land for a very long time. So that was the next evolution. Ocean Drive expanded. Other bars wanted to compete with the Clevelander and the Adrian. The Adrian eventually failed, I believe. And then other establishments would come in to attract people. That's when Miami Beach started to change in that way. That made a real clash of, I don't want to say cultures, but castes, if you will. You had those people that were making minimum wage and all that, who needed places to live, and they were living in all these apartment buildings that, again, were not being reinvested in. At that point, real estate in Miami Beach became a good thing to have. Our economy was going down while the economy in South and Central America was going up. And all these places that used to be these crappy hotels that became crappy apartments were now becoming really nice condos. 1997, the average condo price on Miami Beach is $450,000, which is well over $1 million in today's money. And so rich people were moving in. Those that weren't rich, that were pouring all the coffees, that were making the drinks over on Ocean Drive, they really had nowhere to go. And they got compressed into smaller and smaller areas. That created a different type of crime problem. It also created a bunch of people who, not unreasonably, guys paying $27,000 a year for taxes. Why don't I see cops in my neighborhood? Simple, crime isn't happening in your neighborhood. We're concentrating on where the victims need us. No, I'm not going to stand outside your gated mansion. I'm going to be over at 21 and Park looking for a sexual battery, or in this particular case, a serial arsonist. So that was part of how Miami Beach was changing. Then became the Miami Beach that you know now. Became a party destination. It became one of these places that just goes completely crazy on the weekends. Real tug of war between the residents and the businesses, because the businesses really make money off of that. And in my opinion, they employ a lot of people, and a lot of people's living relies on that. However, it devastates the neighborhoods. You can't, on a decent weekend in Miami Beach, you can't walk down the street. We had people that would come to the beach, they couldn't afford to get into a club, and so they'd hang out on the streets. And assaults, fights, as they, you know, as groups of men do in peer pressure, they would start calling out the guys walking by on the sidewalk with their girlfriends and whatnot, making comments or actually physically confronting them and whatnot. That then became the mainstay of law enforcement in Miami Beach, breaking up fights everywhere we went. When I first got there, the weapon of choice was the Heineken bottle. We had so many German tourists, they wanted to drink Heineken. So all the clubs, they would drink the Heinekens, they'd go outside on the sidewalk, and you'd always have these Heineken bottles. So 4 or 5 times a week, you go to a stabbing, and what do they get stabbed with? Break a Heineken bottle and cut up your rival. But yeah, that was basically that Miami Beach kept evolving. Meanwhile, there's other areas of Miami Beach that you don't get to see. North Beach, Normandy Isle, all that, and they also had to evolve. The workers that were doing all the work, the only affordable housing for a while was in Normandy Isles, was in the Collins Park area, and so those areas also changed.
Gotcha.
Not just with the people that wanted to live there, but the people who take advantage of the people that want to live there.
Yeah, man.